Scorponok Origin Transformers. Scorponok is the Decepticon Headmaster's commander and a major foe in the Transformers saga. He features as one of the primary adversaries together with Galvatron as the three-part The Rebirth conclusion of the initial G1 Transformers series and as the main villain of the Japan-inclusive Transformers installment, The Headmasters. After being reborn as Black Zarak, he subsequently emerges as a prominent foe in the spin-off series Super God Master Force. Depending on the storyline, Scorponok has two origins. He is the Nebulan Commander Zarak tied to a skull of a Decepticon in the classic Transformers series, but he is a Transformer attached to a Transactor in Japan.
Oh no, he's back again.
Stephen Keener voiced him in the Sunbow animation for one line. E.G. Ito provided the voice for him in the Japanese dub. Banjo Jinga, who was also the voice of Giren Zabi in the television series Mobile Suit Gundam, provided his voice for the anime series Super God Master Force and the Headmasters. Hirohiko Kakigawa played him throughout the Transformers Zone original video animation. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Whoa!
Scorponok from Transformers film series. Scorponok appears as a minor villain in Transformers and also in 2009 successor named Revenge of the Fallen. He is a tiny Decepticon that shares a symbiotic relationship with Blackout. His primary motivations are to kill, destroy, and kill some more, and no one knows if he's genuinely barely sentient or a crafty opponent who fools both friend and foe. Scorponok is usually around Blackout even when he has been assigned to destroy, just as Blackout is frequently discovered towering, menacing, and silent by Megatron's side. He's an expert at ambushing, owing to his ability to tunnel underground at breakneck speed. His favorite hobby is playing a game of hide and seek with unwary participants, whether robotic or organic. He loves to be both the hider and the seeker. On Cybertron, he was purposefully left far behind battlefields so that he could employ his chameleon mesh armored plate to blend in flawlessly with the surroundings and attack any Autobot patrols who arrived. Megatron offered him greater freedom than other Decepticons because he respected Scorponok's homicidal passion. During Blackout's raid on the Qatari base of the US Second Forward Operations, the Decepticon identified as Blackout sent Scorponok to find and destroy the fleeing unit under Captain Lennox's command. Scorponok listened in from a little further away, while the only surviving soldiers recounted the attack the following day concealed in the sand. Scorponok trailed the unit while they made their approach to the young boy's home, intent on eliminating Lennox. Sergeant Epps, seeing the metal stinger tail aimed at Lennox's spine and shouting a warning when Scorponok chose this moment to attack, foiled his attempt, just as the soldiers came to a halt on the boundaries of the settlement. As Scorponok dived underneath the sand to distract them, the other troops joined in the fight, stabbing Sergeant Donnelly before pulling him underneath. Scorponok drove the troops into the settlement and unleashed a volley of missiles, destroying the remains that the town had been built around and seriously injuring Figueroa. Regrettably for Scorponok, Lennox's request for help to the Pentagon was received, and an MQ-1 Predator drone transmitted photographs of the Decepticon to surprise US military officials. They promptly launched two A-10 Thunderbolts 2s at Scorponok with little effect, and then proceeded to follow up with an AC-130 Spectre fighter, which injured Scorponok severely enough for him to dive right back inside the sand and flee, leaving his damaged tail behind. The tail of Scorponok was returned to the United States on a C-17 transport. Epps, Lennox, and many other troops investigated it on the way and discovered that the only injury the armor didn't shrug off or heal rapidly was a 6,000-degree magnesium burn from a sabot round. Armed with this information, the humans realized they now possessed a weapon capable of harming the invaders. Scorponok regrew his tail and lived in the desert for the following 2 years. Scorponok enters the action after Jetfire defeats Mixmaster in Transformers The Revenge of the Fallen. After having answered Megatron's and the Fallen summons, Scorponok hid beneath the sand surface during the conflict between the Decepticons and the Autobots in Egypt. So when the decrepit backstabber Jetfire was about to finish off Mixmaster, Headmaster, he attacked, catching the aged Seeker by surprise and gravely hurting him. Despite the fact that Jetfire is far larger than him, he attacks him. Scorponok drills twice into his belly, injuring him seriously, but Jetfire throws him to the ground. Scorponok did not survive long enough to enjoy his accomplishment, as a falling Jetfire crushed his head using his fist. Scorponok as a gigantic Headmaster robot in Generation 1 cartoon. Scorponok was a massive Headmaster robot constructed from the ground up by Lord Zarak, who was a clandestine ruler of Nebulus. After learning about the Transformers, Zarak utilized his mental skills to recreate the Hive's whole metropolis into a cybernetic body for him to binary connect with, using the Headmaster technique invented by Autobot Brainstorm, and also later used his comrades in the Decepticons and the Hive. With Scorponok at his disposal, Zarak was able to recover the keys to the plasma energy chamber using the Autobots and transport the Decepticon troops back to Cybertron to regroup with Galvatron. Ultimately, a pulse of plasma energy struck Scorponok in city form, propelling the gigantic Headmaster and the assembled Decepticons far out into space. In the English animation, Lord Zarak and Scorponok only made an appearance in 3-segment episode, The Rebirth, which lasted the whole 4th season and ended the American broadcast of the classic cartoon era. Lord Zarak was the name of the ultimate commander of the Hive, a cruel dictatorship that dominated the world of Nebulus and treated the inhabitants as enslaved people. Every one of the 11 Hive members gained telepathic and telekinetic control over technology, which they used to oppress the Nebulans, eventually migrating to an underground metropolis as their abilities grew. However, as the Hive's brains became more robust, their bodies wilted and became worthless to the point that some individuals who were part of the organization appear to no longer even have biological forms, just artificial shells that contain their brains. Despite all this, Zarak maintains ownership of his body. However, despite his strong frame, he may be paraplegic. He is never shown walking minus his Headmaster suit, and he presumably is blind in one eye, which is always depicted as either closed or solid white. With the advent of the Transformers on Nebulus and the merging of a squad of Nebulan and Autobot rebels into Headmasters, Zarak devised a plan to replicate the procedure with Decepticons. Despite being incapable of controlling the Decepticons completely using their mental powers, the Hive somehow managed to overpower them with their own devices and compel them into the conspiracy, forging a pact to produce both Target Masters and Headmasters. With his other Hive members' brains attached to the Decepticon, the wicked Zarak shifted his focus to himself, recreating the Hive's entire underground metropolis into a massive transformer named Scorponok, to whom he subsequently bonded his own self as Headmaster partner.
Created. Prepare to feel the sting of Scorponok!
Scorponok appeared amid an Autobot-Decepticon conflict, grabbing RC, who was presently guarding the key that led to the plasma energy chamber, and then departed for Cybertron while having the Decepticons on board. Galvatron used the key to unlock the plasma energy chamber as Scorponok morphed into his robot mode and attacked Fortress Maximus. Scorponok, who was departing into space along with the Decepticons on board when the chamber opened, was hit by a spiral of plasma energy and sent flying out into the deepest parts of the space. In the finale, it became evident that Zarak wanted to take over as leader of the Decepticons, despite the fact that the series stopped just as this had been hinted at. Zarak returned in Generation 2 Redux, which is a BotCon magazine set just after all the events of the last episode as a flashback alongside Galvatron, in which they take the Decepticons into deep space only to be chased by Optimus Prime and also the very first generation of Autobots.
Welcome, Commander Scorponok.
How's it going with the operation to blow up Mars?
Scorponok cartoon shows origins. In the Headmaster's cartoon, Scorponok was among a small number of Transformers that fled Cybertron about 4 million years in the past to avoid the Great War and settled in the world of Master. To cope with the extreme climatic conditions on Master, the Transformers created massive, lifeless robotic bodies known as transectors, which they could attach as heads to increase their size and strength. Scorponok went through the preparation required to take up the role of one of the Headmasters, but he resented Fortress's rule and joined many like-minded Headmaster fighters in a revolt that resulted in their downfall and exile from Master. Scorponok had joined hands with the Decepticons and Galvatron by 2011, and his three subordinates, Mindwipe, Weirdwolf, and Skullcruncher, became a part of Galvatron's army in an invasion of Cybertron. On the other hand, Scorponok avoided making prominent appearances on the field of battle, remaining in the shadows in the most literal sense conceivable, and appearing only to lead the Autobot headmasters inside a trap on the planet of Praum. Not long in the future, when Galvatron found out that Vector Sigma was currently in the process of producing a new and powerful alloy, Scorponok recommended against assaulting the planet, instead advising that they eliminate the alloy rather than risk losing control of it to the Autobots. In reality, Scorponok was far more worried about Galvatron receiving the power of the alloy, and he was determined to prevent anybody from obtaining it by destroying Cybertron itself. He had Mindwipe install huge bombs inside Vector Sigma's chambers, which exploded and killed the planet, allegedly destroying Galvatron with it. Scorponok then claimed charge of all the Decepticons, falsely stating that Galvatron was still alive and ordering him from afar. He promptly set a number of far-reaching schemes into motion, beginning with the construction of a large Transtector for himself, putting him on equal ground with Fortress and also his Transtector-cum warship, the Maximus. Enslaved beast formers were used to build this Transtector on the planet Zarak, and to fuel it, Scorponok then had all the Decepticons capture Sol-1, a humanoid solar energy gathering spacecraft that transmitted its energy reserved to Zarak. To divert the Autobots' attention away from his intentions, he sent Sixshot to strike Earth, so that the heroes could concentrate their energies on protecting the planet. While the development was underway, Scorponok concentrated his efforts on harnessing the strength of all the plasma energy produced upon Cybertron's disintegration. Scorponok dispatched the Buridanka towards Athenia and the Earth to distract the Autobots, but was surprised when Fortress unveiled his formidable Transtector's robotic mode to fight it. Scorponok utilized the energy that he had previously collected to manufacture explosives that were placed beneath the crust of Mars and would tear the planet apart in order to generate much more plasma energy in order to fulfill his goals of worldwide conquest.
This is my work of art. It's finally completed. This is the Scorpion.
Scorponok revealed his finished Mega Zarak Transtector to all the remainder of the Decepticons who were on Char, stepping out of the darkness for the very first time as he decided to bring all of his troops on board the ship, which was his new battleship and body, and flew to Mars when the Autobots were preoccupied fighting the Decepticon troops on Mars to thwart the planet's destruction. Mega Zarak changed into a robot and brutally assaulted the stationary Fortress Maximus before escaping into space, just as his plasma bombs exploded and blasted Mars into cosmic dust. The Maximus had been able to soak up part of the energy unleashed in the early phases of the explosion, allowing Fortress to convert into the Fortress Maximus and flee the explosion. Using his Master Sword, Fortress Maximus sliced Mega Zarak's shoulder, driving the Decepticons to run away. Scorponok, believing that his actions had solidified his position of absolute power, planned to be crowned as the brand new Decepticon King on Earth's only moon. But in the middle of the event, Galvatron reappeared alive and healthy and retook command. Mega Zarak and all the other Decepticons who were temporarily subservient to Galvatron tried, but failed to halt Autobot help to Sandra. Galvatron had the evil Decepticons divert the Autobots using a trap at Mega Zarak's suggestion before fleeing to pillage the other worlds for their energy. Mega Zarak changed into a robot to fight Fortress Maximus on the Hive. However, the Decepticons were still forced to leave the planet. Mega Zarak then led the Decepticons towards Sperity, where they were duped into believing the planet was devoid of energy and retreated. They then traveled to Daros, where they formed a partnership with the planet's opulent ruling class in exchange for power, only to leave when the Autobots and all the oppressed public banded together to defeat the corrupt government. The Autobots encountered a beast former called Techna on Daros, who provided them with crucial information regarding Mega Zarak's weak point at the expense of his life. Despite making final landings at Paradise and also the pirate planet, the Decepticons were repeatedly thwarted by the Autobots and the Fortress. So when Decepticons came back to Earth, Mega Zarak's immediate value to Galvatron was diminished, so the evil headmaster resorted to his own schemes, disobeying Galvatron's orders and laying additional plasma energy bombs throughout the Pacific Ring of Fire. When Galvatron confronted the Autobot headmasters by himself in a fight in Alaska, he was eventually destroyed when an iceberg collapsed on top of him. This enabled Scorponok to regain control of the Decepticons once more, renaming himself Emperor Emperor of Terror, while beginning his mission to destroy Earth by attempting to detonate his plasma bombs. After decoding Techna's data, Chrome Dome sped to Earth, where a fight was already in action, and provided the information to Fortress Maximus, allowing the Autobot commander to break open Mega Zarak's weak spot and send the seriously injured Decepticon fleeing into space. Scorponok redirected the Decepticons' focus away from the Earth for the immediate future, leading them back to the planet of Master in quest of a weapon to resist the strength of Fortress's Master Sword. The Autobots chased them, which tragically ended in Wheelie being kidnapped by the criminals and held for ransom for the Master Sword's secrets. Scorponok used this knowledge to create the Zarak shield by using G-metal, and as the two weapons battled, the Zarak shield triumphed. With this win under his belt, Scorponok commanded the charge back onto Earth, aiming to destroy it once and for all, halting only the asteroid zone to fix his Transtector and betray and get rid of Sixshot, who he never even trusted. Scorponok returned to Earth and immediately had the Decepticon put an energy-collecting satellite into orbit before retreating to the buried land of Lemuria, where other Decepticons were already laboring to harvest the famed Chris Magnetal. Scorponok erected death towers using this metal in 5 key locations throughout the globe, generating waves of power that were captured by the satellite. Mega Zarak's last strategy involved luring the Autobots towards the North Pole, wherein he faced Fortress Maximus again for the final time on a Chris Magnetal 6th dais. As soon as the two warriors were on the raised platform, Mega Zarak used the satellite to beam its energy stored down into its Transtector and threw it onto the dais, producing an escalating loop that promised to tear apart the Earth. Scorponok disengaged from his Transtector while fleeing back into space along with the Decepticons to witness the destruction of Earth, only for Fortress Maximus, powered by the mixed energy of the Autobot troops united in some kind of a head formation, to decimate his Transtector, attempting to break the circuit and rescuing the entire planet.
The Autobots have finally beaten the Decepticons.
In the Super God Master Force anime, Scorponok led the Decepticons in an attack on the Autobots. After his setback on Earth, the scheming Scorponok took the Decepticons back onto Char, and the battle shifted to a succession of space-based confrontation with Athenia. Scorponok prepared for the creation of an entirely new, smaller Transtector, which relatively speaking was bigger than a combiner that had hyperdense armor. But before he was able to combine with it, he was caught by the malevolent alien energy being Devil Z and indoctrined into his service. Scorponok was then hooked directly into the chest, rather than as a headmaster to his new Transtector. With a new head on his Transtector's neck, Scorponok became Black Zarak and returned to command the Decepticon troops in combat against the good Autobots in space. Meanwhile, Devil Z instigated a battle on Earth in which humans were united with Transtectors in order to turn into Headmaster Juniors and Alta God Masters. With the Autobot force growing in strength, Devil Z called Black Zarak on Earth, but the Fortress Maximus' young brother, Grand Maximus, arrived before him and informed the Autobots of his impending arrival. They built God Bomber, who combined with Super Jinrai to produce God Jinrai, who could fight Black Zarak inside space when he came. When Black Zarak landed on the moon when God Jinrai was battling Overlord, the battle was easily won by Overlord and himself, but Grand Maximus appeared and evened out the odds. Overlord was finally forced to depart due to an injury, allowing the two Autobots to group up against Black Zarak, and ultimately God Jinrai severed Black Zarak by employing his Godfire Guts ability to blast the villain into space. During his long time in orbit, Black Zarak mastered localized gravity manipulation and developed the ability to create black holes, which he utilized to transport himself instantly to Earth to command the Decepticons in a slow of attacks on key cities. When the Autobots attacked the Decepticons' headquarters directly, Devil Z joined with Black Zarak, retaining Scorponok's consciousness, and utilized his body as a vessel for his devil power, inflicting extensive devastation over the globe with its lethal waves. When challenged by God Jinrai in a last confrontation on the Matterhorn, the evil Black Zarak's body was shattered by the strength of the Godfire Guts, while Devil Z died at the hands of God Jinrai. Black Zarak was revived as part of the 9 great demon generals by the demonic entity Violent Jigar in the Zone anime and manga. It had never been clear if he held the mind of Devil Z or Scorponok, but he looked to have an authentic pirate look going on, now wearing a hook as a hand and also an eye patch. As a troop of Autobot Micromasters pursued the Decepticons, who'd already stolen Planet Zone's valuable Energon Z, Black Zarak arrived suddenly in the blackness of space. The Demon General ambushed the Micromasters aboard Countdown's rocket and trapped them in a cocoon of immensely powerful webbing. Black Zarak then vanished into the darkness, rejoining his compatriots and allowing the webbing to destroy the Autobot spacecraft gradually. The Autobots were able to liberate themselves and send out Sun Runner, who used his radar to trace Black Zarak straight to the other Decepticon. Exploring his comic origins. In the Marvel Comics, Scorponok was originally a Decepticon leader on Cybertron and an enemy of Fortress Maximus. Scourge and Cyclonus were transferred from the year 08 and came under his leadership at some point in the past. Scorponok led his warriors in a modern-day invasion of an Autobot metropolis on Cybertron, demolishing the city and abandoning the site in blazing ruins. As they marched a long line of prisoners of war to their destiny inside the smelting pool, the wicked Scorponok took sadistic pleasure in commanding them to walk faster or experience his sting. After Fortress Maximus launched an attack on his squadron, his forces were overpowered by the Autobots' wrath, as Scorponok commanded an escape so that they could fight another day. Fortress Maximus and all of his followers soon abandoned the battle and departed for the planet of Nebulos. Scorponok raided the Autobots' abandoned fortress but discovered nothing, not even an anticipated trap. They did get a transmission from Lord Zarak while he was on Nebulos, informing them of the coming of the Autobots and requesting their assistance. Scorponok led his men there with joy, intending to capture the new world. When Scorponok arrived on Nebulos, he was first concerned by the shortage of prominent Autobot activity on the planet. He wondered if the Nebulans already had exterminated his detested foes and led himself to be terrified of the aliens for a minute, thinking that they may be physically stronger than him and his Decepticons. These ideas fled the moment he clapped his eyes on the tiny and malleable Lord Zarak. Scorponok, now confident that the natural dominating species was utterly unnoticed, pushed Zarak into exposing the whereabouts of Fortress Maximus, beating up the organic in order to demonstrate his superiority. Scorponok chose to strike Koraha firstly, which was the place the Autobots were all being imprisoned after learning the fact that Maximus had sacrificed himself plus 4 of his men to guarantee peace for the Autobots. When the Autobots refused to submit, Scorponok and his forces laid claim to the city that was the capital, demanding their surrender and pounding away at its recently built defensive walls. The Decepticons appeared to be on their way to capturing the city when the gates were opened to unveil the Autobots. They had come to fight, not to surrender. They swiftly overpowered the more numerous Decepticons with their newly strengthened headmaster powers. Chrome Dome and Brainstorm effortlessly breached Scorponok's shields, blasting him. When confronted with this unforeseen outcome, Scorponok ordered a humiliating retreat. Scorponok and his warriors began researching sustainable ways of disposing of the Nebulan, including ideas such as releasing them into space within anti-gravity powered alloy bubbles made of polymer. During this time, Snapdragon and Apeface returned after a failed mission, having been crushed by a few of the Autobot headmasters, after which Scorponok handed them a thorough smacking around. When the prisoner Lord Zarak hinted that there could be something to this working with Fleshling's business, Scorponok nearly swatted him around before admitting that sharing his power might be in his best interests. As a result, Scorponok and 5 of his warriors went through the headmaster's process, and Zarak turned into his binary bond mate. The Decepticons tricked the Autobots into a trap by using Zarak's child Lyra as bait. During the combat that followed, the Decepticons trapped a number of Nebulans inside floating polymer bubbles. When Scorponok discovered Lyra within one of the spears, he was torn between his sentiments as Zarak the parent and his identity as Scorponok the great Decepticon. The Decepticons triumphed, and the plan was carried out. While the Autobots were engaged in defending the Nebulans, the wicked Scorponok and his army defeated and captured them. Scorponok continued to control Zarak's psyche, leading him to fight lust when at the Mercury Gardens at Melanosis, and yet again at the nursery. During each fight, the combined strength of Zarak and Scorponok wreaked immense havoc, destroying valuable Nebulon wonders. Zarak managed to break free from Scorponok's control long enough to liberate the imprisoned imprisoned Autobots. However, the Nebulan was quickly back on top of his companion, encouraging his warriors forth to doom. Scorponok abducted Crosshairs, Point Blank, Sure Shot, and their various partners to learn Target Master method. So when Autobot headmasters sought to liberate their friends, he disclosed that it had actually been a trap, and swiftly snatched Highbrow since it was the headmaster method that he couldn't master. Scorponok was disappointed to see that Gort and Highbrow's mental disunity mirrored that of his very own headmasters, but he realized that the technique was sound. The problem came with the compatibility of the headmasters' pairs themselves. Scorponok was chased away by Chrome Dome before he could remove the useless Highbrow. The Decepticons discovered that their adversaries had created a fuel converter that would let them travel to Earth thanks to a bug installed in the Autobots' headquarters. They devised a scheme to take it. Scorponok visited Fortress Maximus and invited him to battle to the death. Whoever won would be deemed the victor in the broader fight. Scorponok's challenge was accepted by Fortress, and the fight began instantly. Scorponok gained an early edge by clamping his pincers around his opponent's leg while he was transforming. Maximus, on the other hand, managed to break himself free and responded by attacking Scorponok's most tender spot, Zarak. To better defend his Nebulan body, Scorponok changed into a robot and gripped Maximus in a clamp once more. Cord flipped the script once more by changing into his headmaster mode and crippling Scorponok with his gun. However, according to the regulations Scorponok established before the combat began, this constituted cheating, and the crowd of Decepticons opened fire. It didn't matter because Trigger Happy had already secured the converter. The Autobots were forced to pursue the Decepticons as they departed the planet. When Galen chose to return to Earth from Nebulous, Scorponok and his men followed, deciding to leave the war-torn planet behind. Scorponok's first move upon landing on Earth had been to locate the signal which had brought the crew of Fortress Maximus there. Initially, he merely encountered an imbecile fleshling, but Fortress Maximus, as well as the Autobots, quickly went back to the cave from where the signal had just been issued. Scorponok almost took the human captive in the subsequent battle, and he utilized him as a weapon to murder Zarek's old adversary Galen. He first believed that this would render Fortress Maximus useless, but the human assumed Galen's position and Fortress Maximus forced the Decepticons back. Scorponok spent a long time setting up a base on Earth. First, he secretly took over a genetics facility and produced the Decepticon Pretenders in the hopes of masking his forces cybernetic in nature. Within a computer-simulated environment, he first encountered Optimus Prime during this procedure. Optimus revealed himself to be better at tactics, forcing him back inside his body by bombarding his head with data, causing spasms. Skullgrin was then dispatched to the planet to create a fuel store for the Decepticons' imminent landing. Scorponok utilized his human element to lead a covert program by the mysterious Z Foundation in an attempt to recruit humans to kill the Autobots in his stead. When the plot failed, Scorponok assaulted some of the very same humans in vicious combat inside a parking garage. However, the humans deployed 3 jammer devices to seize control of Scorponok's army, using his own technology against him. Scorponok was severely injured, prompting Zarak to deploy an anti-jammer to free the Decepticons from the signal of the jammer. This allowed the kidnapped Autobots to flee as well. Scorponok's plot to have Mindwipe corrupt the Autobot Highbrow could not have fared any worse. Mindwipe failed to hypnotize Highbrow's companion Gort, so the Nebulan regained control of Highbrow's limbs long enough to pull Scorponok's head completely off his shoulders. Both Scorponok and Zarak blacked out as a result of the rapid detachment without any mental command, and Highbrow went back to the base with Scorponok's skull in his clutches. In spite of his desire to eliminate the threat posed by Scorponok, Highbrow was unwilling to murder him in cold blood, and as he pondered the subject outside the Autobot stronghold, he was ambushed by the gang of Decepticons who already had come to recover their leader's head. The Time War's chronal crisis quickly occurred, throughout which Scorponok was rejoined with his head and revived, at which time he wanted vengeance for his beheading. At this moment, Highbrow had been sent to a limbo by a swarm of Autobots from the future. Scorponok was not picky about who received his hatred, so he joyfully turned his rage upon Ultra Magnus instead. However, before he could launch an attack, his own men were mass substituted in order to make way for a band of Decepticon time travelers. Scorponok was then forced to postpone his vengeance without the majority of his adherents. Instead, he joined forces with the numerous Transformers from 2 worlds, 2 factions, and 2 periods against the furious Galvatron. Despite the warnings of his newfound companions not to rush into battle versus the future Decepticon, Scorponok refused to listen. This gained him a sound thrashing from his opponent, requiring his surviving men to take him out of the battleground while the others removed Galvatron's danger themselves. Soon later, Scorponok was approached by Starscream, a representative of another band of Decepticons working on Earth under the direction of Ratbat. Scorponok promptly sent his vessel to the group's position in the Arctic, only to discover it under siege by Piranacon. Starscream quickly came to smooth things out before any harm could be inflicted, but relations got off on a bumpy start. Scorponok's half-fleshling nature was exposed to Ratbat's company, making a trip to Ratbat's stronghold appear like a fruitless stalling tactic, and especially worse when he learned of Ratbat's plot to grab the fabled power source, which was called the Underbase. Enraged that Ratbat had simply never planned to work with his group, Scorponok sought to lead his men away, just to find his route blocked by the Predacons. When they saw their commander was trapped, the remainder of Scorponok's warriors rushed to attack. The two sides immediately clashed, with Scorponok viciously ripping, shredding, smashing, and blowing his way past Ratbat's warriors. Only the image of Starscream attempting to steal his vessel in the middle of the battle prompted him to order a ceasefire. When the Autobots arrived, another fight erupted, but this round was with the Decepticons banding together against a common opponent. Fortress Maximus and Ratbat, on the other hand, requested another ceasefire in order to unify their troops against Starscream. The team cut short Starscream's absorption of the Underbase's energy in space, but the Seeker's sliver of power was still enough to bestow him with inconceivable might. Starscream used it to destroy Scorponok's spacecraft before flying back to Earth. Despite the fact that Optimus Prime rescued the partnered units and brought them all onto the Ark, the furious Scorponok still considered the proposed alliance disgusting and was determined to take revenge against the traitor. He was appalled by Optimus Prime's noticeable cowardice in declining to join the strike teams opposing Starscream as he went on a rampage. Scorponok was the commander of an assault squad in Tokyo when he realized what Optimus Prime was up to after hearing an offhand comment from Grimlock. Scorponok abandoned the fight and went back to the Ark on the Autobot spacecraft that had brought him to Earth. He discovered that Ratbat shared his thoughts, and the two approached Optimus Prime, who recently had launched a rocket into outer space to get the Underbase to planet Earth. Scorponok blasted the Autobot leader after discovering his apparent treachery. When Ratbat declared his intention to capture the Underbase for himself, Scorponok pummeled him as well, effectively removing him from the picture. Scorponok was almost in reach of the Underbase as it rocketed into orbit when Optimus Prime, now fully restored and now with his Power Master companion back in place, shoved them both out of the path. Starscream came, absorbed the whole Underbase, and soon self-destructed as the two commanders stared in horror. Scorponok decided to extend their ceasefire, just enough for both sides to collect their fallen. Scorponok's leadership of all the Decepticons on the Earth was secure, with Starscream and Ratbat out of the way. Scorponok tried to kill his old nemesis Fortress Maximus by sending Snarler and Karnavac to assassinate his human companion Spike Witwicky once the ceasefire expired. In exchange, Scorponok handed them Pretender shells in addition to Catilla, who was watching and keeping an eye on the mission. Scorponok, along with Weirdwolf and Mindwipe, met with a merc dealer to acquire Autobot combat blueprints stolen by the mercenary. Optimus Prime attacked them just as they were ready to leave. Dealer was actually a double dealer, and he had sold them over to their enemies. Scorponok charged Darkwing and Dreadwind with stealing a second copy of Optimus Prime's brain that had been stowed away inside an alternate reality at the Ink warehouse. He also dispatched the Combaticons to retrieve 2 military warheads and parts from a sophisticated guidance device at the Rutter United States military base. Both squads were successful in their missions, with the Power Masters even capturing the Autobot getaway as well as his Nebulan sidekick, Rev. Scorponok was delighted to brag to the duo about how his plan would result in Optimus Prime's downfall. Scorponok used all of the acquired tech to create a smart missile that could track Optimus everywhere he moved and avoid any obstructions in its path. He also made sure to include a camera in the gadget so that he and his followers could see the Autobot leader's dying moments. Scorponok unfortunately committed a catastrophic error by leaving Getaway unattended. The great escape artist liberated Rev and himself, and the rocket was reprogrammed and turned into a dud. Scorponok ultimately made a definitive landing on Earth, building a base in the city of New Jersey. He dispatched his Pretender warriors, equipping them with a gadget known as an electrostator and a Stormmaker station to gather the electrical discharge of an intentionally manufactured storm, which would subsequently be converted into energon cubes using the converter on their base. The operation failed, but Scorponok maintained his base there. Zarak continued to act as an undercover human for Scorponok, helping the Decepticons fight the rising prominence of Road Handler in the city of New York. When the Nebulan saw the Autobot compete in a pro wrestling fight, he teamed up with Scorponok and called Cybertron to summon their own Micromasters to meet him inside the ring. The Airstrike Patrol, who were Scorponok's newest recruits, drew him into a conflict near MacDill Air Force Base. He assaulted the Autobots who had been bothering his men, declaring his presence in no uncertain terms, only for those same forces to retreat. Optimus replied with such frigid rage that even Scorponok was taken aback, making him understand that something larger was at work behind the scenes. After calming down, Optimus Prime attempted to talk to Scorponok regarding the alliance and collaboration, despite the fact that they were both being influenced by an unknown individual. Scorponok wasn't really interested in listening to him, but recollections of Prime's charitable efforts during the happenings of the Underbase saga ultimately won him over. The Pretender enhanced Starscream came just as he was about to trade notes. Though dazed at first, Zarak was eventually shaken awake by Optimus Prime and wielded Scorponok's armaments to shoot Starscream. Starscream implored Scorponok to take him under his leadership once again when the Decepticons and the Autobots had overwhelmed him. Scorponok accepted, despite the fact that his forces were in desperate need of reinforcements and weaponry. It finally lost him the trust of Mindwipe and Trigger Happy, who abandoned him after Starscream once again went AWOL. Scorponok entered Decepticon history in 1991, when Optimus Prime publicly surrendered in the hopes of forming a new force to confront Unicron, who was the Dark God. Scorponok initially intended to betray Prime's confidence in order to strengthen his own position of leadership, but Prime finally persuaded him of the Chaos Bringer's threat and convinced him to unify their troops as a group of dissident Decepticons led by Shockwave assaulted Scorponok's base. Scorponok sprang from the ruins of his stronghold and rapidly dispatched the majority of the rebels. He then engaged Shockwave in lengthy combat that extended across the harbor of New York and over the river into Battery Park. Nightbeat and Optimus Prime halted the battle, as did the entrance of the Neo Knights, a human mutant team. Despite his disdain for the efforts taken by the humans, Scorponok was subdued by two of the humans and was almost slain by Circuit Breaker. Circuit Breaker utilized all of her might to knock Shockwave out, and Scorponok decided to give up the fight. Scorponok was actually wondering about Prime's well-being after they, as well as the rest of the Transformers on planet Earth, were transferred to Cybertron by Primus. Primus spoke personally to his offspring on the Transformers' mother planet, instructing them on their role in combating his perpetual adversary, Unicron. Threatened with Armageddon, Scorponok confided in Optimus Prime about his anxieties about death, who comforted him that there was no shame in being afraid. Scorponok pledged that he would be happy to die fighting with Optimus, which he almost did when the two were attacked by a bunch of Unicron fanatics. Although Scorponok had the choice of abandoning Prime to his destiny, the Decepticon in him refused, and he charged at the cultists. With the fight won, Scorponok released one of the fanatics at the request of Optimus Prime. The climatic fight began only seconds after Unicron landed at Cybertron. Scorponok was initially stunned by their foe's sheer size and was even more scared as Optimus Prime was easily thrown aside. But he rose to the occasion, drawing on his Decepticon lineage to launch a deadly attack on Unicron. Unicron attacked him with a torrent of fire while tearing at the giant's foot, gravely injuring him. Optimus Prime stood over him while he died, comforting him in his last moments. The burning remnants of Scorponok were discovered after the conclusion of the fight with Unicron. In the IDW movie comics, Blackout and Scorponok were soldiers working for the Cybertronian Defense Force and were under the command of the High Protector Megatron prior to the war. When unknown enemies invaded Cybertron, Scorponok and Barricade were sent on reconnaissance. During the battle, Blackout and Scorponok, who had never been away from Megatron's side before, were sent to join Starscream's soldiers elsewhere on Cybertron as Megatron moved in on the Allspark. When the gang discovered that both Megatron and the Allspark had departed Cybertron, Blackout concluded a debate with Starscream about what to do next by unleashing the frightening Scorponok. In disgrace, the Decepticons trudged back to Cybertron. After repairing their spacecraft, they followed the Allspark's energy signature to Mars, then to planet Earth, where Scorponok charmingly assisted in slaughtering a US military facility in Afghanistan. Scorponok held a teleconference with Shockwave and Ratbat just prior to the Great Shutdown, when he chastised the latter for thinking like a computer instead of a warrior. In the Titan movie comics, Scorponok was tracked down by Ironhide and a squad of US Special Forces. Captain Lennox was supposed to lead this expedition, but he was transferred. Scorponok assaulted Ironhide and gained control of his motor functions, causing him to rage among the humans. Fortunately, one of the groups was able to break the bond with a shot, as Ironhide shattered the Decepticon to bits. Scorponok was also part of a plot to implicate Mudflap and Skids. When Sideways was caught, Scorponok went to Diego Garcia and launched an attack to rescue his colleague. He should not have been capable of accomplishing this without being seen, and he timed his attack to coincide with the twins diverting Optimus Prime. Scorponok personally fired at Prime before tearing apart Sideways' cuffs, displaying several ball bearings, and he then got away. Scorponok spied on a troop of moon-based Autobot troops and subsequently helped Starscream combat them in an alternative reality where Megatron triumphed in a battle in a Mission City. Even during the Civil War of the Decepticons, he served as Blackout's secret weapon against Stockade. Not only did he fail, but he was also used as a missile weapon against Blackout. What makes Scorponok so special? Scorponok is unlike any other Transformer. Size, firepower, and expertise, he has every edge. Scorponok is a hybrid of a living metropolis and a mechanical scorpion and robot fighter. In robot mode, his size would most likely be 2 to 3 times that of any other. His stature and reach would give him a significant edge over anyone else. Scorponok's scorpion and robot versions are likewise brimming with armaments. Other Transformers possess tank mode weaponry and may be able to launch missile satellites from all rocket components. However, they might be gunned down, as Scorponok's arm guns and strong claws tear away any tracks, immobilizing anyone else and leaving them almost powerless. Scorponok has a more mobile robot form, and Scorponok's claws are more dexterous than anyone else's.
The Transformers will return after these messages.
Conclusion. Scorponok, as portrayed in the Headmasters, is the Decepticon Headmaster's devious, power-hungry, megalomaniacal, and authoritarian commander. He has a strong thirst for power, as seen by his effort to revolt against Fortress and his ambition to lead the Decepticons. Scorponok is incredibly brilliant and personable, as seen by his ability to instigate an insurrection against Fortress and effortlessly convince the evil Decepticons that he had been getting orders from Galvatron, as well as when he took command following Galvatron's death. Nonetheless, Scorponok has his flaws, the most evident of which are arrogance and overconfidence. His ego has caused him to make risky mistakes, and his cockiness was on display during his devastation of Mars, and even during the climax when he believed that he destroyed the Autobots and the Fortress. These characteristics lead to his undoing. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone!